Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. This whole mess started because some power-hungry retirees decided my family's century-old farm was cramping their style. By the time it was over, I owned half their neighborhood and they were packing moving trucks. Let me start from the beginning. My name's OP and I'm a third-generation farmer. My great-grandfather bought this land back in 1923 and we've been working it ever since. It's not massive, about 100 acres on the edge of what used to be farmland, but is now an expensive suburb. The old farmhouse where I live was built in 1892 and sits on the prettiest corner of the property, surrounded by oak trees my great-grandfather planted. In the 1980s, my grandfather sold about 30 acres to a developer who built a subdivision called the neighborhood. Nice enough houses, nothing too fancy, but the kind of place where people move when they want to feel like they live in the country without actually dealing with country life. For years, we got along fine with the neighbors. They'd wave when they drove by. Some would stop to buy fresh vegetables, and everyone understood that we were here first. That all changed about 5 years ago when the Homeowners Association got new leadership. The president was this guy who I'll call President P, a retired middle manager who seemed to think running an HOA was his chance to be a CEO. His sidekick was the secretary who I'll call Secretary B, who treated violation notices like Christmas presents she couldn't wait to hand out. Then there was Treasurer G, who was obsessed with property values and treated every conversation like a real estate seminar. The first sign of trouble was when they started complaining about farm smells. I mean, we're talking about a working farm here. Sometimes it smells like manure because that's what farms smell like. They filed official complaints with the county about odors, noise from tractors, and dust from harvest season. Secretary B was constantly taking pictures from the property line, documenting every piece of equipment or any grass that was slightly too tall. I tried to be reasonable. I explained that this was a working farm that had been here since before their grandparents were born, but they didn't want to hear it. President P kept talking about maintaining property values and how the neighborhood was becoming more upscale. He said things like how they understood I had a business to run, but that business needed to be more considerate of the community around it. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was having coffee in the kitchen when I saw a certified mail truck coming up the driveway. The letter was from the County Planning Commission, which was weird because I hadn't applied for any permits or changes. When I opened it, I nearly choked on my coffee. It was a notice of application to rezone my entire 100-acre property from agricultural to mixed-use residential. The applicant listed was the Homeowners Association. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They were trying to force a zoning change that would make farming impossible on my own land. Mixed-use residential meant I couldn't have livestock, couldn't use farm equipment, couldn't store hay or grain, couldn't do any of the things that make a farm actually function. I called the county office immediately to find out what was going on. The clerk told me the HOA had filed the application claiming they had legal standing as an adjacent community organization to request zoning reviews for undeveloped parcels. She said it was unusual, but technically within their rights to file the application. Whether it would be approved was another matter. 3 days later, I was fixing a fence when a shiny black SUV pulled up. Out stepped this guy in an expensive suit who introduced himself as a representative from some big development company. He had this practiced smile and started talking about partnership opportunities and community development. He made me an offer for the farm that was so low it was insulting. When I told him the property was worth at least 3 times what he was offering, he just shrugged and said that was the market rate for agricultural land that was about to be rezoned for residential use. He explained that his company was working with the HOA to create a master-planned community that would benefit everyone. The real kicker was when he told me the HOA believed they had legal standing to force the rezoning, which would make farming impossible and corner me into selling. He presented his lowball offer as a courtesy before things got complicated and expensive for me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about petty complaints anymore. They were actively trying to steal my farm. I asked around and found out the HOA had been meeting privately for months, planning this whole thing. They'd hired lawyers and found some obscure clause in the original town charter from when the subdivision was built. Apparently, when the neighborhood was developed in the 1980s, there was some vague language about zoning consultation rights for adjacent undeveloped parcels. It was a stretch, legally speaking, but with enough money and lawyers, they could make my life hell fighting it. I decided to attend their next HOA meeting, which was held in President P's garage. The whole board was there looking smug and prepared for my arrival. They had charts and graphs showing how much property values would increase with new development. President P gave this whole presentation about their vision for the community and how they'd signed a consulting agreement with the development company. Here's the part that really got to me. If the deal went through, the HOA would get a multi-million-dollar payout from the developer. President P promised residents this money would go toward a new community pool, tennis courts, and lower HOA dues for everyone. Basically, they were bribing the entire neighborhood with my farm. They painted me as this greedy farmer standing in the way of progress. Secretary B had prepared a whole folder of complaints about farm operations disrupting the peaceful suburban lifestyle. Treasurer G had spreadsheets showing how property values would increase once the eyesore of the working farm was replaced with nice new houses. The residents ate it up. Here was a chance to get fancy new amenities and lower dues while also getting rid of the occasional farm smells and tractor noise. I tried to explain that this was my family's legacy, that the farm had been here long before any of them, but they didn't want to hear it. I hired a property lawyer who specialized in agricultural law. She looked over everything and gave me the bad news. The HOA legal claim was weak, but fighting it would mean years of litigation against a developer with deep pockets. Even if I won, the legal fees would be enormous. Meanwhile, the developer's legal team started burying me in paperwork. Discovery requests, depositions, motions for this and that. Every week brought new legal bills. The HOA ramped up their harassment campaign, filing more complaints about everything from the height of my grass to the noise from my chickens. They created a Facebook group for the neighborhood where residents posted constantly about how the farm was hurting their property values. Secretary B organized residents to call the county inspector every time they saw a truck or tractor. They complained to the police about noise at 7 a.m. when I was doing morning chores. The pressure was working. After 6 months of this, I was drowning in legal bills and stress. The town council was making positive noises about the rezoning application because of the tax revenue the new development would bring. The developer came back with a final offer that was still well below what the land was really worth, but it was life-changing money. My lawyer told me that even if we won in court 2 years down the road, the legal fees would eat up most of the difference between their offer and the land's true value. I was backed into a corner, facing either a forced sale at below-market rates or financial ruin from fighting in court. I spent a lot of sleepless nights sitting at the kitchen table in the old farmhouse, looking at the pile of legal bills on one side and the developer's insulting offer on the other. This was my lowest point. It felt like I was about to lose everything my family had built over 3 generations. But then I had an idea. If they wanted to play games with money and legal technicalities, I could play that game too. But I was going to play it better than they ever imagined. I called my lawyer and told her I wanted to accept the developer's offer, but with some specific conditions. I wanted an all-cash payment to close in 15 days. I wanted a 1-year rent-free leaseback of the original farmhouse and the 2 acres immediately around it. And I wanted a non-disclosure agreement preventing the developer from discussing the final sale price. The developer was so eager to get started that they agreed to everything immediately. The deal closed 2 weeks later. The HOA threw a massive celebration barbecue. President P gave this gloating speech about their vision and victory. Secretary B was taking pictures of everything for their Facebook group. Treasurer G was already planning how to spend their consulting fee from the developer. What they didn't know was that I was now extraordinarily wealthy, more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. The first thing I did was fly to another state and set up an LLC with a generic name through a lawyer. All business would be conducted through attorneys and registered agents, making the true owner completely anonymous. I told everyone I was taking some time to figure out my next move after losing the farm. For the next few months, I laid low in the farmhouse, watching the HOA board enjoy their victory. Meanwhile, my LLC was quietly researching property records for every member of the HOA board and their key supporters. Then, the real fun began. The LLC started making unsolicited offers on the homes of HOA board members. Not just any offers, these were incredibly generous, 40% above the highest recent sales in the area, all cash, 10-day closing, no inspection required. Treasurer G was the first to bite. The offer was so good his money-obsessed brain couldn't refuse it. He and his wife were gone in 2 weeks, moving to a bigger house in a different state. Secretary B was next. She'd always complained about wanting a bigger place, and this was her golden ticket. She sold without a second thought, also relocating far away. One by one, the board members and their biggest supporters started disappearing. Each sale created more buzz in the neighborhood. People were wondering who this mysterious LLC was that was paying such incredible prices. Some residents started hoping they'd get an offer too. President P was the last holdout. He was proud of his house and his position as HOA president. So the LLC made him an offer that was nearly double his home's value. His greed finally overcame his pride, and he sold too. The key condition for all sales was that the properties had to be vacated within 30 days of closing. No exceptions. Then came the next HOA meeting. The remaining residents were confused when I walked in. President P, who was attending his last meeting before moving, tried to have me removed since I was no longer a property owner in the neighborhood. That's when my lawyer stood up and introduced himself as the legal representative for the LLC that now owned 7 properties in the subdivision, including those of President P, Secretary B, Treasurer G, and 4 other key HOA supporters. As the majority property owner, the LLC held a controlling number of votes in all HOA matters. I made my first and only motion as the representative of the LLC. I called for a vote to dissolve the entire current HOA board, effective immediately. Then I cast the deciding block of votes. The motion passed. President P and his cronies sat there looking absolutely stunned. After months of gloating about their victory over the stubborn farmer, they were suddenly powerless. I nominated a new 3-person transitional board consisting of myself, my lawyer, and one of the few reasonable neighbors who'd always hated the old board's antics. Our first act was to eliminate about 90% of the petty rules the previous board had created, including all the ones they'd tried to use against my farm. The aftermath was beautiful to watch. The old board members were gone. Forced out of the community, they'd tyrannized, not by eviction, but by their own greed. They had money from the sales, but they'd lost their homes, their friends, and most importantly, the power they'd craved. I ran into President P a few months later at a discount furniture store in a town about an hour away. He looked lost and insignificant, nothing like the man who'd stood in his garage giving presentations about his vision for the community. When he saw me, he just turned and walked away. I now control the HOA and have transformed it back to its original purpose of basic maintenance and community coordination. No more petty rules, no more harassment campaigns, no more power trips. The new development is going forward, but now I work with the developer from a position of strength to ensure the community respects the area's history and includes green spaces. I still live in the old farmhouse, which I kept through the leaseback agreement. The fields are gone, replaced by construction, but I preserved my home and my dignity. What started as a devastating loss turned into an absolute victory. The best part is that President P and his board thought they were so clever, using legal technicalities and deep pockets to force me out. They never imagined that giving me all that money would let me buy my way back into power and kick them out of their own neighborhood. They wanted my land so they could get a new community pool and tennis courts. They got their payout from the developer, but now they'll have to enjoy it from cheap apartments in other states. I kept my home, took control of their precious HOA, and have a front row seat to watch a better community grow. One that I now control. The whole experience taught me that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. When people try to use money and power against you, sometimes the best response is to get more money and power than they have. These days, I'm thinking about what to do with all those houses the LLC bought. Maybe turn them into affordable housing for young families, or rent them to people who actually want to live in a community instead of trying to control it. Either way, it'll be better than having them occupied by power-hungry board members who think an HOA presidency makes them kings of their little subdivision. President P and his crew taught me a valuable lesson about how the system works. Money talks, and if you have enough of it, you can buy your way out of almost any problem. They just didn't expect me to end up with more money than they could ever imagine, or that I'd use it to completely dismantle the little kingdom they'd built. Sometimes the best revenge is living well, but sometimes it's buying out your enemies and watching them pack moving trucks while you wave goodbye from your front porch. Update. 6 months later. I figured I should update everyone on how things have played out since I posted this story. A lot has happened, and some of you were asking what I did with all those houses I bought. First, the legal stuff got resolved completely. The developer actually came back to me wanting to renegotiate our original deal. Turns out when you control the HOA that was supposed to be their partner, you have a lot more leverage. I managed to get them to include a small park area and preserve some of the original oak trees from the farm. They weren't happy about it, but what choice did they have? The rezoning application was quietly withdrawn once I took control of the HOA. Funny how that works when the people pushing for it suddenly don't live in the neighborhood anymore. As for the houses, I decided to do something that would have made the old board absolutely furious. I converted 3 of them into affordable rental properties for young families and teachers. The rent I charge basically just covers maintenance and taxes. President P's old house now has a family with 4 kids who love that they can see construction equipment and learn about how houses are built. Secretary B's place is rented to a couple of teachers who started a small vegetable garden in the backyard. The other houses I sold to carefully selected buyers, people who wanted to live in a community, not control it. I made sure they understood what kind of neighborhood this was going to be. Relaxed, friendly, and definitely not the kind of place where people measure their neighbor's grass with a ruler. The new HOA has exactly 5 rules. pay your dues on time, don't blast music after 10 p.m., pick up after your dog, don't block fire hydrants, and be decent to your neighbors. That's it. No approved color palettes, no restrictions on what kind of car you can park in your driveway, no committees to approve every tiny change to your property. The neighborhood Facebook group is completely different now too. Instead of complaints and violation reports, people post about community events, recommendations for local services, and pictures of their kids playing together. It's what a neighborhood social media group should actually be. But here's the really satisfying part. About 2 months ago, I got a call from a lawyer representing President P. Apparently, he was trying to move back to the area and wanted to know if any houses in the neighborhood were for sale. The lawyer said his client was willing to pay above market rate for the right property. I had my lawyer call back and explain that unfortunately, all sales in the neighborhood had to be approved by the current HOA board, and we had a policy of thoroughly vetting potential buyers to ensure they'd be a good fit for our community values. The lawyer asked what the approval process involved. My lawyer told him we'd need character references from previous neighbors, a detailed explanation of why they wanted to live in our specific community, and a signed agreement to abide by our community standards of treating neighbors with respect and not engaging in harassment or frivolous complaints. We never heard back from them. Secretary B tried a different approach. She actually showed up at my door about 3 months ago, claiming she was just in the area visiting friends. She spent about 20 minutes apologizing for how things went down and talking about how she missed the neighborhood. She kept hinting about how she'd learned from her mistakes and would love to move back someday. I was polite but made it clear that the community had moved on and was doing really well with people who were focused on building each other up instead of tearing each other down. She left looking pretty disappointed. The funniest update involves Treasurer G. Apparently he used his windfall from the house sale to invest in some get-rich-quick scheme involving cryptocurrency and lost most of it. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's been telling people the whole HOA situation was a misunderstanding and that he always respected the farm. He's been trying to network his way into real estate investing groups by claiming he has experience with property development deals. The development itself is about 60% complete now. It's actually turning out pretty nice. The builder incorporated some of the historical elements I requested, and the park area has become a real gathering spot for families. Kids from both the new development and the original neighborhood play there together. I've been thinking about what to do long term. The farmhouse sits on those 2 acres I kept, and I've been considering different options. Maybe I'll start a small market garden, or perhaps set up some kind of agricultural education program for kids. The irony isn't lost on me that I might end up farming again, just on a smaller scale, right in the middle of what used to be my fields. One thing that's been really gratifying is how the story has spread. Other people dealing with HOA problems have reached out for advice. I always tell them the same thing. Document everything, know your rights, and sometimes the best way to beat the system is to understand it better than the people trying to use it against you. The old board members wanted to create their perfect little kingdom where they could control everything and everyone around them. Instead, they ended up scattered to different states, having lost not just their homes, but their entire social network. Meanwhile, the neighborhood they tried to control has become something much better than what they envisioned. I'm writing this update from the front porch of the old farmhouse, looking out at kids playing in the park where my cornfield used to be. It's not the same as having the working farm, but it's something good. Something that honors what this place used to be while embracing what it's becoming. The best part is knowing that President P, Secretary B, and Treasurer G are out there somewhere, probably still bitter about how things turned out. They spent so much energy trying to force me out of my own home, and in the end, they're the ones who ended up leaving. Sometimes justice takes a while, but when it comes, it's worth the wait. For anyone dealing with similar HOA problems, remember this. They're counting on you being too tired, too broke, or too scared to fight back effectively. But if you're patient, document everything, and think strategically instead of just reacting emotionally, you might find opportunities you never expected. The nuclear option isn't always available, but when it is, don't be afraid to use it. Sometimes the only way to deal with bullies is to show them that you can play their game better than they can. I never wanted to be in a war with an HOA, but I'm glad I won it. And I'm especially glad I won it in a way that made the neighborhood better for everyone except the people who deserve to lose. The next one is a pro-revenge story. My neighborhood does not have a homeowners association, at least not anymore. When my parents first moved in, my older sibling, maybe 2 years old, and with me as a little glowworm, there was an HOA. They took money from the neighborhood in exchange for their services. At first, and for quite a while, my parents just kind of shrugged it off. The HOA shoveled the snow off the streets in winter and dealt with trash collection, so they were doing something worthwhile, right? Ha! No, the city controlled the snowplows and garbage trucks, not the HOA, but still, there was the illusion of effort. And besides, one summer they decided to contact a company to plant new trees all over the neighborhood. The fact that the company was owned by the son of the head of the HOA was totally coincidental. The trees were the beginning of the end for the HOA. Why? Well, my grandma on my dad's side was visiting when they came around to plant the trees. My grandma, who is a certified master gardener, and so she stared through the windows of our house as the guys planting the trees just dropped the saplings on the grass, still with their roots inside the bag they came in. No holes dug, no holes cut, just a bagged sapling lying on the grass like a pathetic and sad stick. The saplings laid there all night. No one came back to actually do their job and plant them. My master gardener grandma mentioned offhand that those saplings were going to die unless they got in the soil, and something clicked in my mom's head. She was paying the HOA money, actual money, every month while both she and my dad worked, taking care of two very little kids, sending us to daycare and preschool and arranging babysitters and feeding us, and the homeowners association was just going to pull this half-assed bullcrap instead of do what she's paying them for? No ducking way. So she showed up to the head of the HOA house and basically demanded that the trees get planted properly, like she's apparently paying for them to. The head of the HOA, so excited for someone actually caring about the neighborhood, made their second mistake. They asked if Mom wanted to join the HOA. She agreed. The trees were planted, but most didn't make it. My grandma was right. First things first, my mom showed up to the next HOA meeting. There were like 5 people there. No wonder they asked Mom to join. They desperately needed the people. So Mom looked at this collection of white people, herself included, who weren't even paying money to the HOA like the rest of the neighborhood. All the contractors the HOA called in were close relatives of other HOA members and weren't paid by the HOA. After all, they're family. So my mom started digging. She spent pretty much a full summer taking down the HOA before she had to go back to teaching in the fall. With me carted along after her and my sibling old enough to be in school or daycare, she dug through the years of paperwork detailing the HOA financial situation, and she found something, extremely enlightening. The HOA didn't actually do anything. Well, they didn't do anything to benefit the community. Everything they claimed to do was either covered by the individual homeowner or by the city itself. So they were collecting money from all the neighborhood residents under false pretenses, and actually they weren't even supposed to be in our neighborhood. Their association zone was a whole different neighborhood. So what is a working mother of 2 small children to do while her husband is off at work and she's off for the summer? She goes door to door with pamphlets. Me and my sibling in a stroller as she weaves her way through the neighborhood blocks, pamphlets explaining the situation and how to stop paying for services you'll never get. Pamphlets that are, of course, written in both English and Spanish to account for the high amount of Latino and Hispanic people in our neighborhood. And naturally, she got a lawyer and an accountant. It put a major dent in her pocket, but if it meant the entire neighborhood wasn't exploited for money each month, it was worth every penny. Another HOA member helped her sift through the documents and data and pass out pamphlets and encourage people to show up to the meetings, but had to back out because of work-related reasons. My mom rolled up to the courthouse flanked by the lawyer and accountant, her kids safe at home with her husband, and had more than enough evidence to get the homeowners association the duck out of her neighborhood, expose the fraudsters for the frauds they were, and make sure that no HOA would ever push their luck in our neighborhood. It's been almost 19 years and no one's even tried making another homeowners association in our neighborhood. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened ages ago in high school. I was talking about it recently with someone and thought you all might get a chuckle. When I was 16, we moved across the country from the north to the south. New school, new culture, new friends. The friend group I ended up fitting into had a girl who allowed others to treat her badly because she wanted attention. An actual example was she allowed a boy to draw a target on her forehead and spit spitballs at it. Wild. We'll call this girl Lana. I was always nice to Lana and sympathetic when she'd get angry with people for going whatever she considered too far. I'd try to tell her that she needed to establish boundaries, but she'd go right back to letting people walk all over her. One day, I was on my way to the trash can when I noticed Lana had a balled-up piece of paper on her desk. I said, "Want me to throw that away for you?" She said yes, and it was no skin off my nose. I was already on my way to the trash. I like being helpful, but that doesn't mean I'm a pushover. I'm the youngest sibling and only girl of 4 kids. That moment must have made her think she could climb up the social totem pole by stepping on me. Because later, during study time while the teacher was out, Lana looked at my best friend, we'll call her Amanda, and said, "Hey Amanda, watch this. Maleficent Froyo is my idiot." She looked me dead in the eye, dropped her binder on the floor and said, "Pick it up." I was flabbergasted. Amanda looked at me and said, "Froyo, you don't have to pick it up. I'm not ignoring this. I've been openly disrespected in front of the whole class. Lana, like me, was really short. I had maybe an inch on her, and it gave me a beautiful idea. I told Amanda, no, it's fine. I'll pick it up." Lana looked so cocky when I said this, but that was cool. She wouldn't be feeling cocky for long. At the back of the classroom along the side wall were 2 tall school library-style bookcases. I picked up the binder, walked right past Lana's outstretched hand, snagged a chair, climbed it, and with the tips of my fingers barely managed to push it on top of the bookshelf, which meant she wasn't getting that down without help. Amanda was laughing her ass off when I climbed down, and I said to Lana, "There, I picked it up." Lana immediately turned to a boy in our class, we'll name him Chris, and whined to him to get it for her. Bonus point, she needed it for our next class. LOL. I looked at Chris and said, "Chris, I've always been nice to you. This is between me and Lana. She disrespected me, and all I ask is that you stay out of it." He apologized to Lana and stayed in his seat. I let her whine for a bit, and when she finally apologized, I said, "I'm more than willing to help you if you need help, but that doesn't make me your idiot. It makes me a good friend. So, be a good friend back and treat me nicely." Then I told Chris if he wanted to help her get it down, I was cool with it. She never tried that on me again. The next one is an entitled people story. This took place over 20 years ago when I was in high school. I was really into our local hockey team at the time, and I had acquired 6 tickets for a playoff game as I had planned on inviting some friends to go with me. All but one of my friends bailed on me at the last minute, and because no one in my family cared for hockey, I ended up inviting my last friend's family to the game as they loved local sports in general. Things were going okay at first, but about 10 minutes after sitting down, my friend's dad taps me on the shoulder. The family sat in the row behind my friend and I, and with his hand out declares that his family is thirsty and hungry. I said okay, not really knowing why he was telling me or why he was holding his hand out, and he continued on saying that things are tight at home right now and they can't afford to buy drinks or food. I felt bad seeing as I dragged them to this game, so I decided I would go and buy hot dogs, fries, and sodas for everyone. Some of the family was disappointed by the food they got, but I had to apologize and tell them that it was all I could afford. I had $20 left on me, hoping to save it for gas later. However, just before halftime, they were selling pucks that you signed, and during halftime, they would ask everyone to throw their pucks onto the ice, and whoever was closest to the center wins a $500 gift card to Staples. I decided on spending my last $20 to buy 6 tickets, as I had been playing this game for years and never won. So I finally get the pucks all signed and ready to throw when I feel that ducking tap on my shoulder again, and I turned to see the same outstretched hand and pitiful look as my friend's dad asked when I was going to hand them out to them. I originally planned on saying I wasn't, but I was 16 and had 0 backbone, so I reluctantly handed 5 of them over so everyone got a shot, all of them scratching out my name and putting theirs instead, which only further annoyed me. After the chaos of flying forbidden wagon wheels, they announced the winner, and for the first time in my life, I won something. And it was huge! I was so ducking happy. I have to go into the center ice to accept the prize, and the entire family follows suit. I get my prize and have my pictures taken, and that was that. Until we all sat down. Not even a minute after getting settled, I feel the familiar tapping on my shoulders, and I'm straight up considering breaking his dick skinners at this point. I turn around and he asks how we were all going to split the prize. I legitimately laughed until I saw my friend giving me a dirty look, and I realized he was dead serious. I told him I was planning on saving the gift card for when I go to college so I can buy a laptop and school supplies. He sighed dramatically and said, "Well, that's not very fair to us, is it?" I told him I already gave his entire family a free chance at winning, as well as a free meal and free ducking tickets. What more does he need from me? He, of course, answered by saying that his family were guests because I invited them, and guests should always get what they desire. Also, how it's my duty to look after my guests and pay for everything they need. All because I asked them to come to a game with me and my friend. He genuinely got me feeling really guilty about everything, so I caved and split the $500 6 ways because I was told I was being greedy when I offered them all half of the $500 and they could split the $250 amongst themselves. This caused a blow-up in the parking lot, and I relented and said fine. We went straight to Staples after the game, and I had seen so many things I wanted and needed, but could no longer afford with my measly $84. I ended up buying candy and had grabbed 2 games, but my friend and her family were sneaky and got a laptop for over $480, leaving me with basically enough to buy some candy, and that's it. The crappy thing is they had taken the gift card from me at some point and bought the laptop quietly before giving me the card and telling me I can use the rest with dumbass smiles on their faces. I only found out I had less than $20 left after trying to buy the games but getting declined. By this point, the family was in their car, and when I got there, I was fuming and was ready to tear into them, but they cranked up the music and ignored me. I completely disowned that friend that night and never spoke to her ever again. I got to watch her bring her new laptop to school though, which flash boiled my piss. I hate myself for being such a spineless coward, and I have no one to blame for this but myself. I know that now. I just couldn't believe how entitled her entire family was. She seemed totally normal, and the few times I met the family, they seemed equally normal. But her dad ended up being a freaking psycho. Anyways, that's my story. No climax or conclusion, just a blue